Good morning, I'm Raven Gray, and this morning we're going to be talking about technology, specifically digital tech and its impact on our lives. Is it improving the quality of our lives? To share your thoughts on air, please call us on 415-663-8492. The digital revolution, things like smartphones, social networking, the internet, they've all been taking place at lightning speed. We're becoming enveloped in a world of technological gadgets and wizardry whose superpowers defy the imagination. Michael Harris, who wrote The End of Absence, says, "Never has change occurred at so rapid a pace. Look at the rate of penetration, the amount of time it takes for a new technology to be adopted by 50 million people. Radio took 38 years to reach that mark. The telephone took 20 years and television took 13 years. More recently, the web took 4 years, Facebook took 3.6, Twitter took 3, and the iPad took only 2. Google+, which nobody even finds useful, took only 88 days to reach the 50 million mark. The rate of technology absorption is stunning. Just one generation after the first cell phone took place in 1973, there are now 6.8 billion cell phone subscriptions. That's nearing a 1-to-1 ratio with human beings. In South Korea, that number reaches a sobering 99% saturation. Now, we've evolved to live in a biosphere, but now we live with our consciousness enveloped and embedded in a technosphere. It's not just mobile and internet technologies. There's all this wearable gadgetry, nanotechnology, geoengineering, artificial intelligence, genetic modification, robotics, and oh, so much more. And then there's the Internet of Things, which you may or may not have heard of. That's the Internet of everything, and by this I mean the growing network of physical things that are embedded with software, smart software and sensors, and which connect to all manner of other things in your home and around you and the internet, receiving and sending data about their conditions and your behavior. You know, I didn't even know what this was until earlier this year when I went to buy a slow cooker. And I found out that they're all smart cookers now. They've all got remote wireless gadgets embedded into them so that you can program them from your holiday in Hawaii, etc. And, I looked at other digital devices, washing machines and other things, and they're all like this. You can't buy just a normal plain device anymore. Now, the speed of technological progress is absolutely astonishing, and it's changing everything in our world. Who can keep up? Who can imagine life without these things? Does anybody remember life before the internet?
Yes, I do.
I know that you do, Bernie. And what I'm really interested to know is how has all this fast-paced technology improved the quality of our lives, if it has? Has it made us happier, healthier? Has it brought us closer together? How is it changing our brains, the way we think, feel, interact, and interrelate with the world around us? And what are the implications of having everything and everyone connected all the time? You know, I used to see bumper stickers on cars. I used to have one myself that said "Question Technology," but I
have mine as "Question Authority."
Well, that's the next best thing. There's a relationship there. But I don't see those bumper stickers anymore about questioning technology, and I just wonder if anybody is actually questioning all this technology, or are we just letting it take over our minds, our bodies, our hearts, our lives, and trusting that it's all for the greater good and that it's just the way things are meant to be? And where is all this headed, do you think? Please call in, join the conversation. Is technology good or bad? Is it hindering or helping your life? I'd love to hear your views. So I'm going to say, I'm in my 40s, give away there. And when I was a kid, we had a television, a telephone, a record player, a radio, and a car. I think we had a washing machine as well. But, none of these things were central to our lives. We hardly used them. What we had were long days outside, playing in the sea, examining critters, climbing trees. And I remember long conversations and imaginative games with my siblings. And, I vividly remember our home, our neighbors, our family, our friends. Life was slow and intimate. And I'm only in my 40s, and I'm here co-hosting with a couple of old geezers with grey hair. And I'd love to hear from you two. What was it like, when you were kids? How has that changed? Over to you, Paul.
Well, so when I was a kid, good heavens, we had black and white TV, remember that? In fact, I think the first color TV we had was from Magical Mystery Tour when that came out. We had one telephone, one car, one, and it was a dial telephone.
Yes.
Yeah, and was it simpler? Yes, of course it was simpler. But here we are sitting surrounded by digital technology. We couldn't do this show without it. And, I don't know. So is that helping? Is this helping the world? We hope so.
Didn't we have radio back in your day then?
We did have radio, but it was all valves and tubes and, all those old things. All those things that glowed and got hot instead of little transistors and things that are all just beeping away and talking to our fridge probably and saying it's time to open the fridge and defrost the freezer and all that sort of stuff so that your slow cooker can turn itself on at the prescribed time and you can communicate with it from your cell phone. That's a wonderful thing, don't you think?
Not sure if you're being sarcastic there, Paul. What about you, Bernie?
Well, my parents wouldn't get us a TV, so I couldn't wait to go to a friend's house so I could watch their TV while the friend was hoping I came over to play with them. And then because I didn't have a TV at home, I think and I'm an only child, so I was home alone, a latchkey kid. And the radio was my friend. I needed to have that contact with the world, and it was my umbilical cord outside of the house. So now I have screen time. I have 2 screens on my desk. The internet is there, and I've run the whole gamut of becoming totally immersed in this internet world. I love it. I feel the power of all of that, and it really is an extension of when I was a child listening to the radio. So I definitely think I got hooked early as a companion, but now that companion is this huge bully in the world. And if I can't remember my user ID or my password, I know I'm going to spend 15, 20, half hour just trying to get to one of my buddies online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, who am I here? A great line.
These user IDs and passwords,
yes.
I counted. I have over 60 accounts for which I've got to keep track of what name am I going at? Bernie@sonic.net or Bernie Steffen or Bernie.Steffen or Bernie, and then a million different user IDs because one requires special characters, the other doesn't allow special characters. You can't live anymore in a simple world on the internet.
There's probably an app for that, so you can keep track of
there
your
is,
passwords.
but I don't trust that. That would have all my passwords, so I trust a piece of paper on my desk.
Do you trust the cloud? That's the question.
No.
No, I don't trust it, but I'm in it. I just have no choice. It's like the weather. It picked me up into the cloud, and here I am.
I want to talk about, in really technology for me all started to get very fast-paced in my 20s. And before that, I knew that television was bad because somebody, I think it was my father, gave me a copy of Jerry Mander's book, 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. And Jerry Mander lives in Bolinas. I asked him to come on the show, but he wasn't able to make it today. But when I was 15, I think I read that book, and it was eye-opening. I was like, wow, okay, television is bad, quote unquote. And so I switched it off and I stopped watching it. But sometime in my 20s, I can't remember exactly when, back in the 80s, the internet arose and mobile cell phone technology, and I just got caught up in it. I thought it was different from television. I didn't see the connections. I thought it was sexy. I thought it was cool, and I thought it was going to change the world for the better. But then what changed dramatically for me was when I gave birth to my son in 2008. And suddenly I was like looking through the world through his eyes. And what I saw is that there were screens everywhere. I was horrified. They're everywhere. They're in the supermarket, in the doctor, in the dentist, at the gas station, at the gym. Every possible place you can go, there's a screen, not to mention everybody looking at their iPads and their iPhones. And I could see my son's eyes tracking always towards these screens and always being drawn to them like a moth to the flame. And then what I was horrified by was the explosion of technological toys for your baby and your child. And they were coming into our lives unbidden. And there were, apps for toddlers under 2 to keep them entertained. Strollers are now sold with double iPhone holders. I kid you not, guys. And so you can, be entertained, mum and baby on the go. And now, it's much, much worse in 2015. I actually looked online and there's something called the iPotty, which is an electronic potty with an iPad holder that you sit, your toilet trains your kid and entertains them on the go, and it's every
Does
kid.
Does it give you a report of the outcome?
No idea.
No.
I think it's ghastly, and also having had my son in the school system for 1 year, it's every kindergarten, every kid on an iPad now. And after, I thought it was a joke, but they're actually phasing out handwriting in favor of keyboarding. And so, I didn't want that for my kid. So I pulled him out of school, and I tried to keep him away from as much technology and media as possible. I mean, is he different? Yes. Is this possible? Not really. Does he fit in with the other mainstream kids? No, not really. And is it a problem? Well, it's complicated. Bernie?
Yeah, about children and that technology so early on, I think it's definitely detrimental because it's taking away the time of being a live being interacting with other beings, other species, other humans, and it's clearly an opportunity cost at best. Mm-hmm. But at worst is it makes us believe that's the most important thing in life. It makes us believe that nature is almost irrelevant, but your competency in the cloud is what matters. Your competency at communicating quickly and efficiently and effectively and being so plugged in that makes you the important person or so it's changed our whole focus of what we aspire to from an early age. I know that a lot of parents will try to keep TVs away from kids, but it's impossible. If you ever seen a little kid, a little toddler, pick up an iPhone and learn how to use it and then start taking pictures with it, it's actually so much power in that kid's hand, you can understand why they want to do it. And from parents have been using technology as a sort of entertain my child, babysitting, if you will, or, watch this TV show, watch this movie now, here, play your game or whatever. That's an extension of parenting, which is not healthy. We know that, but it's what we do.
The American Academy of Pediatricians issued guidelines for children and screen time based on a whole slew of research that links screen time with various psychological and physical health problems. And their recommendation is 0 screen time for kids under 2 years old. But then a study by Common Sense Media in 2013 showed that actually 38% of children under 2 are already using an iPad and an iPhone daily. And that number doubled in 2 years from 2011. I say it probably has doubled again in 2015. There's probably 60 to 70% of kids under 2.
My grandson in 8th grade was only one of 3 kids that didn't have a smartphone. So, that's more than 90% of the class has the smartphones, at least at 8th grade.
What's 8th grade? How old?
That's 12, 13,
yes.
yeah.
I mean, the Kaiser Foundation also came out with a report that says the average 8 to 10-year-old American, I should say, spends 8 hours a day. That's 8 hours a day on a screen. And older teenagers spend more than 11 hours a day. I mean, which begs the question, who exactly is raising our children? Is it Facebook? And, I see kids and people everywhere attached to their screens, young kids playing games, watching movies, texting, Facebooking. But I see adults doing the same. And I just wonder where it's all headed, don't you?
So let me break in by saying this is KWMR Weekly Let's Talk with co-hosts Bernie Steffen, Raven Gray, and Paul Raffel. And today our question to you, the audience, is our high technology helping or hurting us? So we haven't had calls yet, and we'd like to hear from you. 415-663-8492. What's that again, Paul?
415-663-8492.
I like hearing an actor say it.
So here, speaking of acting, after the show on Saturday, Much Ado About Nothing, we went to Vladimir's, and there were 2 couples sitting at the bar, 2 guys, 2 women. Both women were on their phone the whole time, texting the whole time. The guys were talking. One of the guys went to the bathroom. The other guy immediately picks up his phone. So there's 3. And he was actually sitting next to me. So I actually said, "Oh, all 3 of you are texting now." He just, what? But yeah, this I've written before about the blue light. There's that glowing blue light that is endemic to all screens, and it's always the background to Fox News. It's always the background to sports programs like Daily Show. Jon Stewart always had blue in the background, that vivid neon blue, because it attracts the eye, right? And in his case, he was doing it to imitate Fox, but yeah, it's that glow, right? Look, it glows. Ooh.
It's alluring.
Yeah, it draws you in. It draws your attention in, and who knows? It may dull some part of the brain that. And we have a call on line 1. Hello, caller. You're on the air. What's your first name?
It's Pamela.
Pamela, hi. Welcome. Thank you for calling.
Well, go ahead, Pamela. What's your question or comment?
Don't really have a question as such. Just wanted to point out that over the last few weeks I've read a number of articles. I've read a bunch of articles in Psychology Today about the effect on the brain of people who use Facebook intensively.
Oh, really? Go ahead.
Okay, it turns out that the average people are checking Facebook 10, 12, 15, 20 times a day, sometimes every 10 minutes, and that if they are not able to get access to Facebook, they actually get extremely anxious, and a whole bunch of anxiety disorders being diagnosed for people who are not able to get to their Facebook. There's also a lot of statistics about what people do in addition to using Facebook, all the other activities that they do in connecting with friends, communicating, writing this, writing that, reading this, posting this to somebody else, going on to Twitter and sending something further on. And a number of these people are now being diagnosed with narcissism, that the number of friends has become more important on Facebook than the number of friends that they actually have in real life. So I think one of the things that people need to look at is what this is actually doing to the brains. And I recommend people to look on Psychology Today, because they do have a whole bunch of different articles about the problems which are occurring in mental health areas and what might be able to be done about it. Anyway, that's my sort of comment about it. Do people really understand what using these technologies 24 hours a day is doing to their brains? Oh, another thing that they pointed out in one of the articles is that people get very nervous if their iPhone is more than arm's length away, and so they sleep with it. They check 10 times a night sometimes, so they're sleep deprived. And there's all kinds of really strange things going on with people who are addicted, obsessed, and addicted, and almost obsessive compulsive disorder appearing in people using this, basically the social media and the iPhone or their smartphone. So that's my point, really, is we need to have a look at what's really going on in the brain and what's causing some of these mental disorders.
Right, yes, exactly. I mean, there's a book by Sherry Turkle, she's a director at MIT, called Alone Together, where she studied hundreds of children who've bonded with robots and various digital devices. And she concludes that the real draw is that we now never have to be alone, that we can be wherever we want to be at any time, constantly stimulated and entertained, and we never have to be bored. You know, we're alone together. And you know, there are a number of studies and people writing about this. You know, that is it isolating? Is this technology addictive? Is it making us more self-confident or more withdrawn? Probably more narcissistic. I actually looked up on the internet yesterday that there's Internet and Tech Addiction Anonymous, which is a 12-step group nationwide for people who are addicted to using the internet or Facebook. I'm kind of addicted myself, the truth be told.
Right. It leads to very peculiar things. I mean, we saw two women walking along the street, obviously good friends, and one of them was telling the other about her recent holiday and telling all kinds of anecdotes and stories. And at first sight, you could see the two were sharing these experiences. But the one who was, quote, listening, unquote, had her iPhone down by her side and was texting to somebody at the same time she was listening. So you think, what is going on there? Is that communication?
Well, unless we're evolving to be multitasking beings. There's some people that say that the youth are becoming very good at doing multiple things at once. I don't know if I agree with it, but I've I've read that. I mean, I have a smartphone. It's always with me. It's always within arm's reach. It's right here next to me, and just like most people, I use it for tracking and finding my way around rather than a map. It's really good for directions, and I use it for Facebook and purchasing products. I take oodles of photos and videos of my son, which I never look at again. And I generally waste time on the web. And after my father died last year, I noticed that my tech use went up enormously. I just was anxious, so I was constantly looking at things to distract me. Is it healthy? No. I mean, most of the time I do want to throw my iPhone in the toilet, to be honest. It's a love-hate thing. But, I depend on it as a second brain. If I misplace it, which happens, I get frantic. What about you, Bernie? What's your relationship with your iPhone?
Okay, I'm going to hang up.
Oh, well, thank you, Pamela. Yes, thanks
Thank
for
you,
your
Pamela.
comments and questions. Over to you, Bernie.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at my Facebook. I wasn't paying
for
attention to what you're
goodness
saying. Sorry. I had to check. I got an alert that somebody on Facebook had posted something. I just had to see it. Well, I'm totally addicted. I've loved technology my whole life. I programmed computers and just couldn't wait on the first personal computers, and have continued with that technology so that it is indeed part of my brain, that it is part of me. Oh, and the other thing that's like that is my car, and I've often questioned myself, if I had to give up one, my iPhone and the internet, or my car, that's almost an impossible decision. and I joke around with that idea of I could just throw this iPhone in the creek here and just walk away, or I could abandon my car and walk away, but I can't. Both.
How long have you owned an iPhone for, or a smartphone, whatever you're using?
Well, I had a new phone every year or two. I had one of those early cell phones that weighed like 30 pounds that you carried like a briefcase because I worked at the phone company and it was free. So I got used to using the phone and first for business purposes, but it soon spills over into personal use. So nothing is there's no borders anymore either between doing business and being personal, and they are extensions of the brain. I think of it as a brain outside of the body.
But what does that actually mean, Bernie, that you're outsourcing more and more of your brain to a tiny little device that you don't have to think about anything anymore, you don't have to remember anything, you just ask your smartphone? I mean, is that a good idea, or is the smartphone actually...
There's two questions there.
Well, is it dumbing you down? Is it a de-skilling device? Is it making you smarter, enhancing your intelligence? Probably not.
Well, don't ask me 6 questions, but I'll answer. I'll try to answer. It's on the one hand, the reason it's so addicting is it's so powerful, so that my brain, by outsourcing all these functions, can be ever more complex. I can be ever more places virtually. Mm-hmm. I'm pretending to. But on the other side, as you're correctly pointing out, that means I'm nowhere in nature. I'm not outside actually interacting with other species and other human beings. So it's like any video game. It's addicting because you have power within that game. You see an outcome. You make a move. You enter something, and there's a reliability and a predictability that you're seeking in life. And it's a substitute for living. It's a virtual living. And so clearly the virtual living will come to an end at some point. And I don't know when it'll come for me. I know it has to come for all of us at some time.
You hope it will come to an end.
Oh, no, I know it'll come to an end.
Right now our kids, as I just said, are spending 11 hours a day on screens. I mean, are children able to distinguish between...
It all requires electricity. And when the electricity is no longer a cheap commodity that we get 24/7, things will start changing again. That peak oil thing, peak everything, this is peak human knowledge, peak human technology. We are at a level in our society we've never been before, and it just can't be sustained. It's way too complex, and complexity requires energy, and we're going to run out of energy. So that's why I'm confident to say it'll end.
Well, it isn't ending yet.
Soon enough.
Soon enough. We have another caller, I believe.
Okay, caller on line 1, you are on the air. What's your name, please?
I'm Stephen from Marshall.
Stephen from Marshall.
Hi, Stephen. Welcome. What would your comment?
Greeting you by some old technology, the telephone.
Yes, exactly.
And, I was just thinking about the contradictions that are inherent in all the technology, in particularly the smartphone. And I just took a second to write some of this down. On the one hand, it gives us tremendous freedom, technology. On the other hand, it's used to control us. We have tremendous power from it. For example, when somebody says they don't know something, I say, just Google it, It's instantly you have an answer.
Yes.
On the other hand, it weakens us because we don't know how to get that information ourselves anymore. I bet who can use the old dictionary? Oh, my God, it's such a pain, It isolates us because we do so much on our own, but on the other hand, we're connected in a new way that has given us access to people and things in ways that we've never had before. So the connectivity. Let's see. We're isolated, but we have more friends than ever. They're just online, and we're hanging out with everyone we know and many people we don't know. Also, there's the potential for incredible harm that we can do ourselves online. For example, posting things on Facebook that will come back, and your employer will look at your post, or they hire you to see, what a fool you are, whether you're partying at night. Another thing is that we're not there and we're everywhere. We're not really enjoying. We're not present at the place we are. I can remember thinking that I was at an opening, and there were this couple, a gorgeous man and woman, kid and his girlfriend there, and he was looking off into space, and she was texting. It was like they were together, but they weren't together at all, and they were sitting right next to each other. Let's see.
Alone together.
Yeah. Well, those are some of the things that I thought about in terms of the contradictions, but look at the power it's given us today. I mean, here we are. We're communicating perhaps with a wide audience of people.
Yes, perhaps.
5 or 6.
Well, at least you even know how many people are out there. You don't, but...
Well, I was reading about the medical innovations. It's mind-boggling when you look at the medical innovations in technology. I mean, we've got 3D printing of organs and blood vessels. And, doctors and surgeons are now wearing Google Glass, if you know what that is, to sort of track their patient's medical history in real time. And then my mother was telling me about digestible sensors. It's a digital pill that you swallow, and then it does a full physical body examination of all your vitals, etc., all your hormones, and it just tests everything. And
what was
and
that
then
app name again?
It's I don't know what it's called, Bernie, but we've got apps and gadgets to stay healthy and all these. It's just astounding, but I question it. I don't know if it's actually, is it helping to improve our health, or what are the hidden costs? Is it worth it?
Well, what do you think? Is it worth it?
I don't know, Stephen. What do you think?
I think it's definitely worth it. I think that number one, there's no going back, and I like the empowerment part of it. We're doing so much more today. The reason we can't do without it is we're so much more active because of it.
Active in what way do you mean?
Well, you can be, if you're in business, you can be driving your car, and you can be doing business while you're in your automobile.
Oh, texting and driving, good idea.
No, come on.
Just kidding.
Right. That's true. Well, I'm
just kidding.
You can be anywhere, and then you can be somewhere. I don't have to be in an office anymore to be on the road.
That's true.
I just think that you can watch your kids. You can find out what time they are. Hey, meet me at 7 instead of sitting out in front of the auditorium waiting they're coming out or waiting for them to show up. You now know when they're going to show up. You can call them at 10 o'clock and say, "How come you're not in?" And they have to answer. They're there.
So you think it's made our lives easier?
I think in general, yeah. The downside is the control aspect. That all of a sudden the government and powers that be have so much information on each one of us that they can use that information to empower themselves in ways that are not necessarily in our best interests.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. Bernie wants to add something.
I heard you say there's no going back. Could you conceive of a situation where I agree with you voluntarily. We won't voluntarily go back. But if we no longer had 24/7 electricity and we didn't have all of the energy that we now have and spend, or that we think we have and spend, could you envision a time of a much lower technology that still serves us?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if you look at other countries in Africa, for example, where they have very little technology, what has really been a boon, the smartphone has been incredibly important. Now they can see what the market's like, whether they can get their food to the market. I mean, there's all sorts of very low tech uses for technologies that they really need. Obviously. That's on just one level. I would challenge everybody here in some sense to say, go one day a week without the internet. Remember the Catholics used to fast on Friday?
Yep.
Yes.
Try one day a week, a day without the internet. Just try it once a week and see if you can pull it off.
I think that's a great idea. That's called going on a digital diet, where you just sort of fast away from technology and just unplug. And some people, I actually go away for 2 weeks every year to an ancestral skills gathering, and I leave my iPhone and computer and everything at home, and I'm completely off grid, and there's no cell service there anyway. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how I feel when I get back. Mm-hmm. So I highly recommend. That's good advice.
How many emails do you have when you get back? That's
about 570. Well, I just ignore them all. Well, thank you, Stephen. Thank you for calling in.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So I'm actually going to challenge this myth that technology is neither good nor bad, and that it's actually neutral, and because it's what we do with it that counts. I don't personally believe that. I think technology isn't neutral at all. I think it has devastating costs to the environment and to culture, and that there's no such thing as a clean, green, fair trade iPhone. So I have this quote from Doug Tompkins. He's the founder of the clothing companies The North Face and Esprit. And he says, quote, "If you hold your cell phone for 30 seconds and think backwards through its production, you have the entire techno-industrial culture wrapped up there. You can't have that device without everything that goes with it. You see mining, transportation, manufacturing, computers, high-speed communications, satellite communications. It's all there, you see, and it's that techno-industrial culture that's destroying the world." He goes on to say that the computer is a mechanism for acceleration. It accelerates economic activity, and this is eating up the world. It's eating up resources, it's processing, it's manufacturing, it's distributing, it's consuming, and that's what the computer's real work does, and it does that 24/7, 365 days a year, non-stop, just to satisfy our own narrow needs. So, Bernie, Paul, do you agree? Is the machinery of civilization colliding with ecological limits to growth?
I completely agree. I mean, I think I like to sort of deny that because I love the technology so much, and I have to have it taken away from me to give it up because I'm not giving it up without a fight. I'm so addicted to it. But I fully recognize what you're saying is that it's the culmination of all of these processes. I remember a couple of years back, people were telling stories about in China where Apple was getting some of its manufacturing done, where treating their workers way below standards that we would hold reasonable, and people were demanding their ethical iPhone. And I've got to say, I found that humorous because it's not ever going to be an ethical iPhone, regardless of what the workers get paid. It's also about the people living in communities near where the rare earth minerals are being mined and the dust is getting into the lungs of their children. It's in the manufacturing processes, it's in the shipping, it's in the distribution, and as you say, it brings it all together. So it's the electrical costs and everything went into that, plus all the mining costs, everything went into that. So it's sort of the epitome of our industrial empire. And we should all really give it up.
Yes, maybe. We've got a caller.
Caller, you are on the air. What's your name, please?
Thank you. You wanted my name?
Sure.
Yes, good morning.
Any name will do.
How about Paul?
Hi, Paul. How are you doing this morning?
Fine. I just wanted to point out that in a society that is rapidly bifurcating into the rich and the poor, that technology, which is unaffordable for a significant proportion of the population, it makes this worse.
Yes. Okay. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Well, simply that the cost of your cell phone, particularly the Apple variety, and the cost of the services with long-term long-term contracts is something that cannot be afforded by a good bit of the world.
Sure, that's true.
The digital divide is still there, or maybe it's worse than ever. Who knows?
But maybe they're getting cheaper. I was listening to NPR yesterday, and they were talking about these new phones, smartphones that are coming out of Asia for a lot less money than my iPhone.
And I saw something on the online about there's a lab that is growing. Not transistors, what are they? They're growing
Silicon.
processors.
Yeah.
But they're growing them out of plant material now. So, who knows?
But what you're
that's all
saying,
gonna do.
Paul, is it's dividing the rich and the poor. It's creating that divide even more.
At least at present, you may be right. Over time, they may get more affordable for more of the population. But right now, a lot of people cannot afford these, and so they're shut off from all that ease and that information. Since information can be a pathway to, better jobs, more money, they're rather shut out.
Yes, I hear you. Bernie, you'd like to add a comment?
I agree with you,
Thank
Paul. I agree with you, Paul. And I want to add another perspective is that maybe it's actually too cheap. In other words, when we buy the phone and subscribe to the service, we're not actually paying the full price of that. There is a externalized cost that Raven was talking about to start this segment that we're actually not paying for. And because it is so cheap, many more people are enrolled in this system that we know is ultimately destructive. And we would be better to really require that the full costs, including all the environmental degradation costs, be put into the phone. But we're all able to buy our cars on credit, and we're all able to buy our iPhones, and we only pay $100 or $200 or $300 when that thing costs $700, $800, $900 because we're signing up for a 2-year contract with a carrier. So it's like financing the phone, and we're making it cheap. I would rather phones still cost $1,000 each, and that almost no one could afford to use them.
And we have another caller. You're on the air, caller. What's your name?
This is Amanda.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, this is an interesting conversation. I personally am a little conflicted about the whole technology thing. I see what Raven's saying very clearly. But being involved with the radio station, as I am, they're no longer really talking about radio stations. They're talking about media organizations for nonprofit community radio stations, which means that in order to really make it work, you have to start jumping on all this new technology, social media, et cetera, in order to be relevant. And I think it's sort of interesting. It's sort of, an old-school thought to not do that because you might be selling out or getting away from your true mission. But in reality, I think that is one of the only ways that we will continue to exist and be relevant as an FM radio station.
Yes.
Good
points. Good points. Definitely.
And especially with kids who, walk in the door and can pretty much problem solve almost anything technical that has to do with a computer faster than, folks a couple generations older. It's an interesting time that we're in, but I can see that the addiction to the online stuff can be a real problem, just like addictions with lots of other things.
Any kind of addiction, yeah exactly. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda.
I wanted to pass along from an associate in the San Geronimo Valley who's an art a sculptor and teaches. And what he's seeing in kids is that they no longer learn how to use a hammer, a saw, a screwdriver, basics of doing things with your hands. They're incredibly proficient at this new technology, but it's definitely coming at the loss of the real world interaction. And my view is that if we understood that this virtual world had to eventually collapse, we wouldn't put 100% of our eggs into it. Clearly, we need it to function in this world. I don't think you can function right now as a member of society, working and all that, without an email account, without, some of the basics like a cell phone. You feel like it's an absolute necessity in life. But if we invest 100% of our training of our children into it, we're doomed. We really need to make sure it's balanced with these more traditional skills where you're using your hands and you're passing along recipes and skills from generation to generation that are outside of the computer. To just sort of riff off that, most of the entrepreneurs down in Silicon Valley actually believe we're approaching the singularity. Do you know about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's when people are becoming more like machines, and machines are becoming more like people, and pretty soon we're just going to become one. And this is real. People actually believe this, that maybe it is. I don't know
we
if it's
reward
really
them with huge salaries, and they live in a world where their achievement within that digital world is what's recognized. And so it's easy for them to see a future in their pursuit, their life's work, their life's pursuit. It's also easy for some of them once in a while, maybe after retirement, or all of a sudden get hit by a stroke of inspiration and recognize that, hey, this whole track is in the wrong direction.
Well, what do you think, Paul, about the singularity?
The singularity, I think it's a scary notion, of course, being still disconnected from actually having a computer installed in my head. As a human being, I think it's a scary notion. But yeah, who's that futurist who's been talking about this for decades?
I've forgotten his name, but I watched his film the other night.
Right, and I'm guessing that if the super infrastructure stays in place and gets bigger and bigger and everything gets cheaper and cheaper, that is going to happen at some point. Google Glass is sort of a really, it's like a hand plow compared with a tractor and all that to what it's going to be. But that's the first start, is to have something really close to your eye.
Right.
Why not put it in your eye? And they're already
people
talking
already
about
are,
that.
I think.
And why not put it in your optic nerve so you don't even have to use your eye? You could see with your eyes
That
closed.
embedded nanotechnology is already happening, guys.
Yeah,
I mean, if you really want to scare the pants off yourself, type into Google militarization of technology, because that is absolutely terrifying. And I don't know if people know that most of our high-tech stuff, digital technology, actually comes out of the military.
Well, it's from military. It was paid for by us.
Exactly.
All the original research.
And it's really terrifying to see where that's headed. I don't actually want to talk about that at all.
Well, one thing we know, that there are presidential candidates like Chris Christie who are saying, I'd bring on the FedEx guy to help us solve the problem of losing track of people who come here legally via visa and then outstay their period of time. So he didn't say it, but there's an implication that somehow we can barcode people or chip people and then keep track of them. And I see this idea of getting a chip into a person as that's the line we've got to avoid. I mean, if indeed we could be electronically identified, we're already biometrically identified with face recognition technology. So walking down the street, if they know who you are and what you like to buy and what's on sale right now happen to coincide, that's a scary thought.
Well, look, let's talk a little bit about politics and economics. Technology, the government is already using technology. They might not have a chip in the back of your head yet, but they're already using it to monitor, analyze, track, and target every aspect of your life and to determine whether you're a threat to the status quo. And that, business, who are in partnership with government, are using technology to track every aspect of your life, to monitor, analyze, everything that you're doing to determine what they can sell to you. So you're either a sheep or a terrorist. And that is already happening. And I find that terrifying too. I mean, How do other people feel about that? Are you concerned about the increasing surveillance? When you drive past Macy's in your car, you guys probably don't do this, but a text message might pop up and tell you that, knickers are on sale in aisle 3 for $1.99. And I mean, that's one invasion of privacy. And another one is, as an activist, if I mention, terrorist type keywords, which I do all the time, then, that has potentially devastating implications on my personal freedoms.
Like revolution and revolt and stuff like that?
I'm sure you're being monitored, Bernie. Paul, too, I expect. It seems to me that we've all fallen under this technological spell and our personal freedoms are being eroded, and we've all consented to this. But did we really consent to all this technology being thrust upon us? And did anybody stop to think of the consequences? And can we put the demons back in Pandora's box at this point?
I don't think so.
And I said earlier, I need to have it taken away from me. I have not enough willpower to do it on my own. It's just so powerful.
You're waiting for the grid to fail.
I'm waiting for collapse to happen, the grid to fail, economic collapse will end this, the cell towers will no longer be sending and receiving, and when that happens, we can throw all this stuff away. I even suggest the idea, can you imagine a week in the United States where the grid was down? Where would your money be? Do those little electronic bits that represent your money fall on the bank floor? Or what happens to everything that we hold so dear right now if we went a week without electricity?
It's a myth, isn't it? That I've heard this myth that technology is extending democracy, but I think the opposite might be true, that it's concentrating power ever more in the hands of a few elite. Do you agree with that? Paul?
It certainly has the capacity to do that. I mean, the cloud is a scary notion to me, and I was really heartened when I saw that there was a lightning strike on Google's cloud headquarters, and it actually blew it up.
What is the cloud? Perhaps you'd like to tell people what the cloud is.
It's just a conglomeration of computers somewhere with lots of memory, and everything that you upload to that computer is going to be there for anyone to see who can get into that. Supposedly it's so encrypted that nobody can break in, but yeah,
right.
We all know that encryption is only a temporary measure until a hacker gets the way through. So, yeah, and of course, everything Google is not in the business of giving us information. It's about making money by advertising, and when they can pinpoint what your desires, what you've bought, what you've looked at, who knows, maybe what you're sending on Google Mail. I'm sure if you have a Gmail account, they're checking to see what you're sending.
Absolutely.
And checking for keywords. And so they're going to target everything to that. And that will fit in with your Macy's thing. They'll all be interconnected with each other. And marketing is everything, right?
It's quite frightening, isn't it? I just want to add that I love the way the cloud is marketed as the green technology of the future, when in fact these cloud technology centers are located in Utah, Arizona, and they use vast amounts of energy and water to keep them cool. There's nothing green about them at all. Anyway, Bernie had a point.
Well, this reminds me of how we've learned now through Edward Snowden and from others how the government was able to coerce AT&T to allow it to duplicate a stream of everything that was going across the internet, going across our phone lines. And so yes, the power concentration is ripe for abuse. We've come from a patriarchal, hierarchical society, and the technology is empowering the top of that pyramid more. That it's giving the illusion at the bottom. We all have tremendous power in accessing all these things, but we control nothing. If tomorrow the servers are not up, our iPhone is worthless. So we think we have this power, but it can be taken away in an instant. And our politics now is clearly using that power in so many ways. I think it's nationalizing elections more. The Iowa and the New Hampshire primaries used to feel more important. That's almost being bypassed. And it's, again, those with the money who can access the media that feeds directly into us, whether we are watching TV, on the radio, driving by billboards, or getting into our Facebook ads, because Facebook definitely knows a lot about about us, as does Google. And those companies are able to sell ads that are extremely highly targeted. And how does that affect our political process? I think it totally disempowers us, as you're pointing out. So it's an excellent question.
Yes, thanks for that, Bernie. Are people still watching television? I mean, is that...
I do. I'm addicted there, too.
Oh, really? Do you watch television, Paul?
I don't have actual television. I stream, things like Jon Stewart when he was still there. And movies, mostly. Yeah.
But I'm watching less television and more time on the tube at the computer. But I'm definitely in front of a screen too much of my life. I heard you mention last week about the practices that you do of giving gratitude and sit spots. That's the one thing that is taking me away from that. But not completely, because I still have my iPhone in my pocket, and I find myself still pulling it out when I'm in nature. So I haven't completely decoupled, pulled the umbilical cord that ties me to the system.
A lot of people use their iPhones to connect to nature, apparently. I mean, look at iBird. You can now go out into the field with iBird, which I have, and you can look up every single bird in North America, and you can type in key characteristics to find it, and then you can play the song and bring that bird right to you. And
but that's not bad. I mean, that's kind of cool, isn't it?
It's kind of cool. It's kind of sexy.
It teaches you about the various bird species that might otherwise you might not.
I don't know if you retain the information, actually. I mean...
Well, there's that other one, iNaturalist. They're doing these bio blitzes, right? And that was fun, although I don't have a smartphone, so it wouldn't work for that. So, no, I have an old flip phone.
You have an old flip phone?
With big buttons on it.
Oh, so that you can see them.
Yeah, it's just, that's all I need. I just need a phone to check my messages back home when I'm over the hill, that's all.
Well, I have an app called iEgotist, and it does everything I want.
All this technology is accelerating at such a ridiculously rapid pace. It's impossible to assess its impact, and I can't keep track of it. But I can see that, as you said, you mentioned patriarchy, and definitely technology grew out of this mechanistic paradigm. It is a machine. It's mechanistic. It doesn't. Because of that, because it's not holistic, it doesn't do you can't do a deep analysis of its impacts very easily. It's not meant to be assessed in the context of culture or the environment. It's meant to be adopted as a tool that makes your life easier. No questions asked. But I mean, ultimately, I think technology is divorcing and disconnecting us from our own body's wisdom, from each other, from the natural world around us. And, that all these apps and technological gizmos are just dividing us further from the real and flesh and blood world. I can't see how that is a good thing. Bernie?
And this automation track we've been on is displacing people from being needed in the mining, the manufacturing, the distribution, the sales. I participated in that as a computer programmer working for Pac Bell and a manager that put in systems that displaced people that used to do those jobs. And that has continued, and it's gotten to a critical point now where to run the machinery of our corporate state, it doesn't take as many people as it used to. And so we can't even figure what people should do to be relevant to that system anymore. It's bifurcated us in that way so that robots and what we call artificial intelligence definitely is continuing to take away people's roles in life. And those roles were their identities. My parents and grandparents all identified with the work they did, the jobs they had, what their role in life was. And now if robots are doing everything we need for us, what's our role?
Well, I have a quote that just along those lines from Brian Appleyard from the New Republic last year, 2014. Very few of us can be sure that our jobs will not in the near future be done by machines. We know cars can be built by robots, cash points replacing bank tellers, ticket dispensers replacing train staff, self-service checkouts replacing supermarket staff, telephone operators replaced by call trees, and so on. But this is small stuff compared to what's happening next. Nursing will be done by robots, delivery men replaced by drones, GPs replaced by artificially intelligent diagnosers and health-sensing skin patches, and the backroom grunt work done in law offices done by clerical automatons, remote teaching conducted by computers. In fact, it is quite hard to think of a job that cannot be partly or fully automated, and technology is a classless wrecking ball. The old blue-collar jobs have been disappearing for years. Now they're being followed by white-collar ones. Anyway, that's all we have time for today, and this was a great conversation. I wish to thank all of our listeners and callers today for your participation. I hope you'll tune in every Thursday at 11 a.m. because your voice really does matter.
And next week, the topic is going to be childhood vaccinations. Should they be mandatory? What is the pro and con?
Well, that should be fun. And this has been KWMR Let's Talk with co-hosts Raven Gray, Paul Raffel, and I'm Bernie Steffen. Now stay tuned for Classical Thursday.